Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I'm going to recreate my first book haul from the channel and see if I actually read any of the books. So this is an idea that came to me when I was filming a video the other day. I thought it'd be interesting to look back at some book hauls and see how many of the books I'd actually read. And this is because, one of the reasons for doing the Read What You Own challenge is that, we all end up just accumulating more and more books. And my hypothesis for this video was that looking back at an early book haul, I'd find that actually I hadn't read many of the books. That has actually turned out not to be true. So what I've got here is a stack of books from my second book haul. So my very first book haul video I did on the channel was a video where I unboxed a box of like 50 odd like old paperbacks that I bought from eBay. And the reason I bought that box was there were two books in that box that were part of the Crown series by Terry Harknett. A series of three like cop novels set in Hong Kong, written in the 70s, and I really wanted to get those two books. And buying them individually was quite expensive, but I found this like literally a box of like 50 odd like old like 70s and 80s thrillers that had those two books in it, and it was cheaper to buy that box than it was to buy the books individually. I haven't read any of those books apart from the two Terry Harknett ones. So that stack of books is in the garage. I will try and get to some of them at some point because some of them do look quite interesting. I'll leave a link to that video in the description so you can go back and watch it should you want to. It's from the very, very early days of the channel, so my style is somewhat different than it is now. Anyway, this then was my second book haul video. So this was from the 16th of October 2021. So 2.5 years ago nearly. And again, yes, a very different style. I'll leave a link to it in the description so you can go back. So what I've got here is almost all of the books I showed in that video. So there are two books that I haven't got here. Those two are two of the Jack Reacher books by Lee Child, which are Die Trying and A Wanted Man. So I have still got those books, but they are in the aforementioned garage and they're in some shelves that a load of other stuff has been stacked in front of. So they're just really, really inaccessible, and I couldn't face moving everything in order to get them. So two Lee Child books back there. I haven't read either of those, or at least I haven't read them since I bought them. I think Die Trying I probably did read like back when it first came out. But I went through a phase of buying secondhand Jack Reacher books with the intention of reading through the whole series, which I still haven't got around to doing. So I will do that at some point. Anyway, here we have then the other books that were in that book haul. There's some horror books here and some crime books here. And what I've discovered looking at this is I've actually read pretty much all of them, I think. So that was not what I expected at all. And I think maybe it comes from being like really, really into, in those early days of the channel, I was really into buying books that I thought would be interesting to talk about on the channel, and so was probably more inclined to read them and make videos of them. And in fact, a number of these books I have like made review videos about. So anyway, let me go through the stack and talk about each of them. So the first one is Scorpion Second Generation by Michael R. Lineker. I still haven't managed to get hold of a copy of the first Scorpion book, which is more difficult to find and quite pricey. This does have a great cover. I read this, I can't remember if I read this for Garb August or something else, but I definitely read it for an event. And it's an entertaining, very silly book about giant scorpions. From what I remember, they're not like giant. They're not like kind of elephant-sized. They're more like kind of dog-sized. But yeah, still quite entertaining. Next then was a book that was a reread for me. So I had read this before. I read it back in the like late 80s, early 90s, I guess. But bought another copy of it with this lovely, lovely cover. I do think that's a fantastic cover. And I reread it and really enjoyed it. So this is Moondance by S.P. Somto. So S.P. Somto is a really interesting guy. He wrote a load of different horror books during the 80s, most of which had fallen out of print, and he obviously has got the rights to them and is republishing them. He's also like a composer and a conductor, and things like that. So he's a bit of a Renaissance man, I guess. But yeah, this is a really enjoyable werewolf book, set in the kind of Wild West era, and just mixes together those two genres in a really entertaining way. It's told largely in flashback, so there's some interesting kind of present day stuff, and then it flashes back to the Old West. But a good werewolf novel if you like that kind of thing. Next up then, a book I hadn't heard about before joining BookTube, and in fact there are a few of those in this stack, but one that I bought and then read. In fact, I think I'd read it by the time I filmed the original book haul video. Really enjoyed it and did do a review of it on the channel. That's The Case Against Satan by Ray Russell, which is a 60s novel of like exorcism, so like predates The Exorcist, but is very similar in a lot of ways, in that there's a teenage girl who's been possessed, or apparently possessed, by the devil. There are a pair of Catholic priests who try and exorcise her. What's different from The Exorcist is, whereas in The Exorcist there is very clearly something demonic going on, in The Case Against Satan it's much more ambiguous, and I think a better book and story as a result. I think this is really excellent. Next then, another one of the ones that I hadn't heard of before starting BookTube, BookTube, and subsequently read and reviewed, The Fisherman by John Langan, which is a really great kind of Lovecraftian cosmic horror story, quite gentle at times. So about these two guys who are both widowed, who go fishing together basically, but discover this creepy fishing place with a dark past. So a really, really good book. I thought this was really, really excellent. Next then, another BookTube discovery, so Sinister Mix by Brian Bowyer. So I'd seen a video where Juan from Plagued by Visions and Black Acre Doe discussed this book, and it sounded really interesting. I've subsequently read a few more of Brian's books. I think he's great. I think he's a really powerful, strong indie horror author. He has a style all of his own, which is kind of difficult to describe. He talks about horrible stuff. His stories are frequently filled with really, really disturbing stuff, but they're really, really effective as well. And I think what I said in my review of this, and I stand by, is you feel like when you read one of his books, you're looking into a like bizarro version of Earth, which is just slightly different, but where like weird, horrible shit like happens and is almost accepted. And I suppose the sad truth of it is that there are parts of the world where that is true. And, you know, Brian brings that stuff to the surface. So I think his books are really, really interesting, and I definitely recommend it. This was a book, so this is The Third Beast by Peter Lochran. So I can't remember how I heard about this book, and I can't remember if I heard about this one first or Dearest by Peter Lochran, which is another book that I read and reviewed on the channel. So this is like a revenge story. So written in, I think, the 80s. Let's double check. Written in 1987. And about this guy who's, I think it's his niece, gets attacked by a gang of thugs, and he gets revenge on them basically. So very much in keeping with that kind of 80s style of like revenge vigilante type thriller, but a very British feeling version of that kind of story. So it was an interesting book. It was quite powerful. The central character is really, really interesting, and his take on the world and the way he kind of sucks you in to his motivation and makes you feel kind of swept along with him a bit, I think is really interesting. So I think this is probably a cut above some of those more kind of cheesy revenge type books. But yeah, definitely really like this, and really like Dearest by Lochran as well. Someone in the comments commented on my review of Dearest the other day to say they thought that it was a book they'd read back, way back when, and they've been trying to remember it, and they thanked me for my review because it helped them identify it. But they said in that comment that their recollection was that the book was called Jackie. Now, Jackie is the name of the female character in Dearest, and lo and behold, when I just flip this book open, it says by the same author, Jackie. So it is definitely, if you're watching, commenter, it is definitely the same book. It must have been published under both the names Dearest and Jackie for some reason. Okay, next then, two Ed McBain books. So I'm not sure if I've read these since buying them. I suspect I haven't. I think the reason I bought these was to complete my collection of 87th Precinct paperbacks. So the two anyway are Doll and Give the Boys a Great Big Hand. Both of which are just fantastic. You know, I love the 87th Precinct novels. These are two, you know, solid examples. I don't think either of them are standout examples, but they're definitely very solid examples. So I do very much like having a complete collection now. So glad that I got these. Next then, another book that I have reviewed on the channel, The 20-Year Death by Ariel S. Winter. So this is good, but not fantastic. It's an interesting concept. So basically it's 3 novels, each set 10 years apart from the previous one, and each written in a different style. So I'm trying to remember now the 3 authors who Ariel S. Winter apes. I think the first one, from recollection, was written in the style of Georges Simenon. One of them was written in the style of Jim Thompson. And I can't remember now who the other one was written in the style of. One of them was written in the style of someone else. But it's a really interesting book and quite effective, and I really enjoyed it. And as you often get with hard case crime, a fantastic cover as well. So worth checking out if that kind of thing appeals to you. And then finally, a book I've been trying to get hold of another copy of for years. So this is a book I had owned. So when I was in my late teens, I went over to the US for like 6 weeks and kind of travelled around a bit and came back with absolutely loads of paperbacks. So that was when, you know, pre-Amazon, pre-internet, it was very difficult to get like US paperbacks and in the UK, and sometimes there were books I'd heard of that I just couldn't get hold of over here. One of those was this book, Dead City by Shane Stevens. So this book is referenced in The Dark Half, the Stephen King book, and I really, really wanted to read it. I bought a copy, this same edition, when I was in the States, and then never actually got around to reading it, and then it got sold off in a big sell-off of books I had to do at one point when I was moving house and just didn't have room for them anymore. Anyway, I subsequently wanted to read it again and managed to track down a reasonably priced copy of it, because it's out of print, really expensive generally, but I found this reasonably priced copy of it and read it and reviewed it on the channel, and it is fantastic. It's a really bleak, depressing crime novel about kind of low-end gangsters, basically. Really, really powerful. Definitely worth reading. Definitely worth seeking out a copy of. I really do think it was fantastic. So that is my first proper book haul from the channel, recreated. And yes, I read far more of the books than I think is probably the case for later book hauls. In fact, pretty much all of them, apart from the 2 Reachers and the 2 McBains. So yes, an interesting exercise. Didn't give me quite the results I expected. But yeah, it was fun to do anyway. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.